Coming up on Video Game Nation.
Majora's Mask 3D shows us the dark side of the moon.
I'll be mangling memories, crushing causality, and generally ripping apart the fabric of time and space as I count down my top 5 favourite time travel games.
Dan and I chat about what's so great and what's not about the new Nintendo 3DS XL. Catchy title, by the way.
And our panel of beautiful experts extol the virtues of handheld gaming.
It feels so personal because it's a screen that's just for you.
All this and no more on this week's Video Game Nation. Towards the end of the 1990s, the world was in the grip of millennium bug fever. If the scaremongers were to be believed, any computer software that abbreviated a year to its final 2 digits would interpret the upcoming year 2000 as the year 1900, causing a tear in the space-time continuum that would render past, present, and future as one and the same, effectively plunging the universe into a state of total... Come on, who's been using Wikipedia? Come on. All right, one second. ...2000 as the year 19... would interpret the year 2000 as the year 1900, potentially throwing the world into total disarray as the millennium commenced. Nuclear power stations would go into meltdown, planes would fall from the sky, toasters would still work, but you get the idea. This was proper end of civilization as we know it stuff.
Fortunately, civilization survived when none of that actually transpired, although a few bus ticket machines in Australia briefly failed, which was pretty inconvenient, and we had the pleasure of seeing in the millennium with The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
So what's the connection? Well, as a game developed during this uneasy period of paranoia and uncertainty, Majora's Mask wears the mood of the era on its short green sleeves.
Shortly after defeating Ganon at the end of the Ocarina of Time, Link is spirited away to a land called Termina, which incidentally is Latin for finish or end, which obviously bodes well. There he discovers that a malevolent Skull Kid has used the power of the ancient Majora's Mask to bring the moon crashing down to the planet, ending all life in spectacularly apocalyptic fashion. It's down to Link to somehow prevent this from happening in just 72 hours, which translates to less than an hour of game time.
Substitute the moon for a programming mishap and Link for a computer engineer, and you've got yourself one hell of an extended metaphor.
In contrast to Ocarina of Time's protracted development period, Majora's Mask took only a year to create. It would appear that the immense pressure its creators were under to get a worthy sequel out is reflected in the impossible deadline Link is given to save the world.
And just as Link inevitably succeeded in his quest, come on, that's hardly a spoiler, Nintendo's design geniuses really outdid themselves.
Majora's Mask is a remarkable, unique entry in the Zelda canon, not least because most of the key elements that characterize the series, Ganon, the Triforce, the Master Sword, and even Zelda herself, are all absent. It's also by far the darkest and the weirdest of Link's exploits.
The weirdest thing in Majora's Mask is, without a doubt, Kamaro. He's this kind of sickly, anemic dancer, and by wearing his mask, you end up learning his dance and teaching it to the masses.
But the weirdest thing has to be the massive gurning moon just crashing his face into Earth. It's pretty weird.
I think the weirdest by far is the most obvious. The fact that there's this massive moon, this grinning, bloodshot-eyed moon that's constantly looming down over you wherever you go in the world, and it's terrifying.
I'll throw the hand that pops out the toilet at midnight into the mix. That was pretty weird.
I think the weirdest thing in Majora's Mask has got to be Tingle, right? I mean, he's like a little man in like a full, like, unitard, and he thinks he's a fairy.
15 years on, and it's clear from the beautiful new 3DS remake that fans of Majora's Mask certainly weren't admiring it through rose-tinted rupees.
While many games are heralded as the Citizen Kane of the medium, Majora's Mask is content to be its Groundhog Day. Thanks to his trusty ocarina, Link can relive the same 3 days over and over until he halts the march of that terrifying moon. Although it features just 4 dungeons, Majora's Mask is not a short game. The focus here is on side quests and lots of them. The hub area of Clocktown is filled with residents who, understandably, would like to make amends or fulfill a dream before their lives are brought to a fiery end. Each of them goes through a daily routine, which Link can keep track of in his handy bomber's notebook until he's able to get everything just right.
Weirdly, although Link will lose all of his perishables and rupees whenever he travels back to the first day, he'll keep hold of any heart pieces and masks that he's gathered along the way. It doesn't make any sense, but it would be a complete nightmare otherwise.
Talking of nightmares, check out this guy, the Happy Mask Salesman. He tasks Link with retrieving Majora's Mask as well as any other masks he happens upon during his adventure. Masks are a massive new addition, allowing Link to transform into several Zelda favourites in quite harrowing fashion. There are 24 masks in total, although everyone inevitably has a favourite.
My favourite mask is probably the postman's hat. I think the postman's hat perfectly sums up the tortured logic in a Zelda game, because for some reason you've got the moons hurtling towards Termina, and rather than try to do anything about that, you just help the postman deliver letters so you can borrow his hat.
My favourite characters in the Zelda universe are the Gorons. I love them, they're just so round and lovable, and they have the best theme tune ever. So for me it has to be the Goron mask, because becoming one of them is like, it's a dream come true.
Kamara's mask is easily the top taker in this one. It's the most accidentally gross thing in a video game I think I've ever encountered.
Despite a slightly frustrating opening that traps Link in Deku scrub form for a full 3 days, Majora's Mask rapidly blossoms into something that's at once melancholy, crazy, funny, inventive, and special. The 3DS version irons out the game's few kinks, most notably the save system, and dolls it up with a significant graphical overhaul, making it the definitive version of perhaps the most underrated Zelda game ever. Avoid it at your peril.
So according to my bomber's notebook, John Robertson should be talking about his top 5 time travel games right about now.
Hello, television friend. High def, high five. With Majora's Mask being the Groundhog Day of the Legend of Zelda series, which loves a wonky timeline as much as its hero loves green tights and muteness, let's rev up the DeLorean to 88 miles per hour, slingshot round the sun, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow, and play some games that know time doesn't just fly when you're having fun, it does whatever it damn well wants to.
Time travel in video games can be hugely beautiful. You can warp physics, change a future level from the past, cheat death of his rightful bounty, and sometimes it's just as good an excuse as any for the Ninja Turtles to fight on a pirate ship.
In honour of Majora's Mask trapping you in a temporal loop with a homicidal moon, while we're here, a plot that's also a central game mechanic, that is tip-top design. The games that I've selected aren't just games that go, oh look, we're in the past, we must be, there's a dinosaur in this level. These are games that trap you in a twisted temporal puzzle box. And I should know, I'm an expert. I dress like Doctor Who. But which one?
Released in 1993 for DOS and Mac, Day of the Tentacle will make you giggle, then give your brain a workout that spans centuries. An item doesn't work in the past, but if you leave it in one place a few hundred years, will it age into the solution to a problem in the future? Stuck in an alternate apocalypse? I'm sure the founding fathers at the American Declaration of Independence can help with that.
This is a flat-out classic. The second of LucasArts' point-and-click adventure games, Day of the Tentacle was developed by a team that included Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer, who've gone on to become industry legends for making games that are funny, but also under the surface are cunning and incredibly twisted.
You wake up and it's time for work. Where do you live? Oh, a strangely peaceful hypermodern metropolis floating above the sky, of course. How do you get to work? Oh, a transporter that can also take you to the Hard Rock Cafe, as it does. What happens if you don't go to work? Well, the entire universe ends, you know, like always. And the plot? Well...
You are a temporal security agent sent back to 3 points in the distant past, which are still in our distant future, to terminate and neutralise 3 atomic robots, otherwise aliens won't contact the human race. And you get to go to Mars. Finally, a game released this decade. Back up in a sky city, but set in 1912 and with shotguns and steampunks.
Join former Pinkerton agent Booker DeWitt and the mysterious Elizabeth, who's basically Doctor Who and the TARDIS is one person, in Colombia, a city held up by blimps, and get ready for a tale of tears, tears, prophecy, prophets, corsets, class warfare, guns, guns, guns. Oh, and huge great rips in the fabric of space and time.
The Bioshock series loves a clever little mystery, and while the gameplay might be a smidge linear, go here, do this, do that, shoot that, kill that, well done, the storyline isn't exactly a line, and it might be a circle. Brutal as the dictators you'll play as, campy as the camps you'll obliterate, this is the ultimate alternative history strategy series.
It takes deep theoretical questions and makes the answers completely bonkers. What would happen if Albert Einstein went back in time and killed Hitler? Well, Stalin would have become a grumpy pantomime villain who owned weaponized Tesla cores and huskies that shoot missiles. In the third installment, someone goes back in time and suddenly George Takei is the Emperor of Japan? Oh my.
I challenge anyone to play this game on the SNES and not be overcome by just everything.
Like all good RPGs, it's about mood and storytelling. Chrono and his pals are engaging, visiting locations that have decayed over time or been altered by your actions. It feels wonderfully deep for a console that was mostly devoted to a plumber.
It's so engaging, you'll even forgive the fact that it's just another malfunctioning time machine story, since there are no stories about time machines where they function without problems. And if there are, then someone has gone back in time and altered the timeline.
Now apparently we have to take a 3-minute break, so I'm going to try to speed things up with the Song of Double Time.
Well, that had no effect whatsoever. I must have played the song wrong or something. See you after the break.
It's not just the fact that it's portable, it's how you relate to a handheld system.
Disney villains you love to hate. Available now on demand.
Welcome back. Now, 35 years after Nintendo decided that digital watches needed to be more entertaining, handhelds are still the best way to get your console gaming kicks on the move. Here's our panel of experts to share their tales of portable pleasure.
My first handheld console was a Game Boy Color. It was a yellow Game Boy Color, and I got it for Pokemon. But then all the other stuff that came out on the Game Boy, because you had such a long history to go with, I went straight on Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, which is still to this day one of my favorite Zelda games. And the DX version of that is the best version of that. It's just my favorite.
The first handheld console I had was the original Game Boy, because I am that old. That is how old I am. And obviously I had Tetris on it, everybody had that. And Super Mario Land, that was really good. But my favourite game on the Game Boy was probably tennis. And it was just called Tennis. Again, this is how old it was, that there was a game just called Tennis.
The Game Boy Color, it was that weird translucent purple one, which I think for whatever reason was like the only available one you can get hold of. And it was amazing. I got Pokemon, the original Pokemon for it. It gave it 4 or 5 fake colours, so in my head Pokemon was always a colourful game, but I absolutely loved that console. I think I've still got it in a box somewhere.
So my first handheld console was the original chunky grey Game Boy. Thinking back to it, I was probably around 7 years old when I got it, so my memories of it are kind of hazy, but I just remember playing Super Mario Land 1 and 2 on it. And when I think about 1, I just feel incredibly stressed out because that game was so frustrating. You know, it was back in the day where you would play for hours and hours and hours, and if you died, you would go right back to the beginning.
Well, my first console was the original Game Boy, and I was very lucky. I got it with the Simpsons game Escape from Camp Deadly. So I was really excited. I was probably about 10 or 11. And I love The Simpsons. They were massive then, so I'd like to get a Game Boy and a Simpsons game. That was like all the Christmases and birthdays come at once. But it's dreadful. But it taught me a very important life lesson, which is that the people who have the rights to like movie and TV franchises will quite happily rinse children for their money.
I'm gonna age myself horribly because my first ever handheld games console was a thing called Mattel Soccer, which was released in 1978. And the thing I remember most about it was that it was chocolate brown. It's just so bizarre. But I mean, I guess that was acceptable in the 70s, you know, like flared trousers and wife swapping.
My favorite handheld console, Game Boy Advance. I obsessively played Yoshi's Island during university. I think that was the main piece of education I brought back with me.
I think my favorite handheld console is probably the 3DS or the Vita. They're both new, but that's what makes them so good. Whereas, yeah, I think other consoles in the past were great. I mean, you know, you can't deny Tetris or Pokemon or Zelda or anything on the Game Boy, but let's be honest, a lot of them were just watered down versions of their bigger brothers on the main consoles, whereas I feel like now handheld gaming is hitting a point where the experiences are themselves worthwhile, and they're worthwhile because they're handheld.
My favourite handheld console is probably the Gizmondo, which was the greatest and most terrible, not even handheld video games console of all time. It was released a few years ago, and the Gizmondo was designed to sort of like do email and play games, obviously, and do music and GPS, and it did all of these things, but not very well. Not one thing was it good at, and it was really ugly and terrible, and it was called the Gizmondo. I mean, that's genius, isn't it?
It's still going to probably have to be the original Game Boy, I think, just because like we weren't really allowed to have consoles in my house, and this was my first one that was like mine, and I've got so many fond memories of playing that.
I think really because of my memories that are attached to it, and that's the Game Boy Advance. And the Game Boy Advance was out when my sons were babies. My eldest son, Zach, was a terrible sleeper, and he was always up all night. So I spent a lot of my time singing Bar Bar Black Sheep over and over again while completing Advance Wars. So, you know, that has kind of seared into my memory.
It's got to be the Game Gear, hasn't it? It was basically a Sega Master System. The battery life was about 3 minutes. You couldn't actually play on it unless it was plugged into the mains, which sort of defeated the point of a handheld console.
Why is handheld gaming popular? I think it's that really common thing of the smaller something is, the more blindly impressed people are by it. And, you know, people don't want to lug around the consoles.
I think handheld gaming is interesting because it's not the same as console gaming in any way. And it's not just the games that you play on it, it's not just the fact that it's portable, it's how you relate to a handheld system. So, I mean, the way I use a handheld system is the way that you might use a book. It's something that you can use not only, like, say, on the train, but when you're in bed and stuff. It's not something that you need to sit around and have this big experience. It's something you can just pull out very quickly for sort of 10 minutes at a time and get some enjoyment out of. And it makes games like Ollie Ollie or Hotline Miami really just even better to be played on a system like that, because you get just really quick fire burst of action. And it's almost like going back to the arcade in the sense that you only play it, you're only expected to play for a really short period of time, and that short period of time is designed to be as rewarding as possible.
If you grew up with video games, it was the one console that you could take to bed with you, and you can play under the duvet after you've been told to shut off your PlayStation. It feels so personal because it's a screen that's just for you. It's not on a TV that you're sharing with anyone else.
What I like to do quite a lot is, you know, dual screen. So I'll be like playing Candy Crush on my phone, watching The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills on my TV, and then I multitask. You know, that's not a waste of a life, is it? That's not a meaningless, oh God, waste of my life.
Why is handheld gaming so popular? I think there's lots of reasons, aren't there? But I think for me, the main one would be that I hate talking to people on public transport. So just make sure you've got your headphones in there, that's the trick. I learned that the hard way on a train to Bristol.
Up until recently, I'd not really paid enough attention to handheld consoles. I mean, yeah, I used to steal my cousin's classic Game Boy to play Pokemon Red, but at heart, I was a PC and console gamer. Now though, I've got a PS Vita and an original 3DS with a Circle Pad Pro attachment, though the latter doesn't really get the love and attention it deserves. I think my aversion stems from the fact that I like big screens, and I'm not a total fan of its 3D features, which can sometimes feel crudely implemented. but Nintendo's first really big hardware update to the 3DS just might change my mind. This is the new Nintendo 3DS XL. Now, I haven't had the chance to spend much time with it yet, but I believe I know someone who has. Dan, you've spent about 75 hours on the new 3DS?
Yeah, sad to say.
You've been playing Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate and Majora's Mask,
Yes.
which I'm very, very jealous about. But how have you been finding the new console?
Well, in both cases, you can definitely tell there's a difference. There's a definite improvement in performance over the previous 3DS consoles.
Okay.
And also, just the new facets of the hardware are incredibly useful too. One, I'm using the 3D a lot more.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess we'll go into that in a bit more detail. And secondly, the C-stick really helps.
Yeah, so everyone, I mean, that was the one thing that everyone really wanted was a second stick.
Yes.
So how are you finding it?
It's good, it's unusual. Nintendo are being Nintendo, and when they could have just moved the buttons down slightly and put an exact, replica of the stick on the left, they've gone with this nubbin.
It is, it's a nubbin.
It's a nubbin, it's exactly
a
what it
nubbin.
is. The best thing, I don't think if anyone's ever used like a ThinkPad laptop, something like that, there's this little red
Yes.
controller there, like instead of using the trackpad. It works in exactly the same fashion. Even though it feels very inflexible to the touch, when you actually use it in game, it works beautifully, and you very rapidly adapt to it.
Yeah, because I'm touching it now, and you expect it to feel just like like a stick, and it's not very tactile. It doesn't really seem to move very much.
No, you expect a bit more movement, a bit more travel, I'd say, and you don't get that travel. But once you see it in action, that all goes out the window.
Okay. And you touched on it briefly before, but it's obviously really important, the 3D functionality. How much has it changed?
So what they've done is they've made use of the camera, and I believe infrared, to implement face tracking technology. So obviously the problem was when you were playing on a bus or you were playing on a train, anytime you jolted or the vehicle jolted, you'd knock the 3D out. It would be really jarring and lead to the infamous headaches that the 3DS was supposedly responsible for. Not so this time. It basically keeps tracks of small movements and keeps that 3D locked wherever you look around. It's an incredibly impressive feat, actually. It's the best use, again, of like glasses-free 3D I've seen.
Okay, and the one thing that's kind of troubling me is it's still missing a charger in the box, isn't it?
Yes.
Why are they doing this?
It's ridiculous. It's kind of saying, if you don't buy a charger, this is a one-use only console, chuck it in the bin.
It's just like, I kind of got it when they did it the first time around, but now it's like, come on guys, this is completely new. I mean, you've added so much new stuff to it.
It's a hidden cost, and it's the most cynical form of hidden cost as well.
And I mean, I know that cost won't be very much, but it just seems mad to assume that this essential piece of kit, like, people will just have.
Yeah, I don't know the logic behind, but aside from just total greed.
So, okay, ultimately, is it worth the upgrade?
If you're going to play it as frequently as I am,
which is a lot.
Which is a lot. Then yes, absolutely. Aside from the improved 3D, aside from the fact that the C-stick completely, makes it a portable again, and also because there is a definite performance improvement as well. I've seen improved frame rates on the games that I've played. Then yes, it is an overall upgrade. I think if you were asking the question about a new iPhone or something similar to that, people wouldn't even bat an eyelid if they were buying one year on year. The new 3DS is such an overall improvement that I think it's definitely worth making the upgrade.
I'm really quite tempted to get one now.
When you say get one, do you mean steal that one?
Yeah.
Yes. I'll distract the cameraman, you just run that way, yeah? Okay. Right, so that's what we think of the new 3DS, but how about you? Are you tempted to pick one up? How about a copy of Majora's Mask or Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate to go with it? Or do you even think that handheld gaming is no longer relevant? Whatever your thoughts, share them with us on our Facebook page or on Twitter using the hashtag VGN, or just pass a note on to Aoife, who'll give it to me if teacher doesn't catch us first. And that's all the time we have for this week's episode. Or is it?
I don't think you've played that right.
Nothing says love like Jim Bowen giving away a speedboat. So this Valentine's Day, enjoy the romantic vibe with the odd contestant jibe. We love Bullseye, today from 2-on Challenge.